The topic of this podcast sort of kind of is, thinking about public speaking. Would you even listen to the rest of this episode if I continued to speak like that? Probably not. In fact, I would question your judgment if you did. Filler words like, sort of, kind of, and non words like and they undermine our credibility as speakers. But there is a way to get rid of them, and I will show you how. This is Show Stopping Speakers with me, Mobeen Tahir. Here I share with you stories and practical tips for becoming a memorable public speaker. So I'm back home with my parents, and I'm walking down the street and I approach a crossroads. And when I approach this crossroads, I notice two workers patching up the road with cement after installing what appear to be new internet cables. Now, what immediately stands out is the lack of a warning sign. Now, in this part of the world, that's a norm. You don't always expect warning signs when workers are working on the road. But I do think that it would have been helpful because there's no warning and freshly laid out cement is on the road. Anyway, I luckily notice that the cement is fresh and I take a big step to cross that patch and I'm on my way. But as I leave that scene, I think to myself, what if someone else doesn't notice this freshly laid out cement? There's no sign. Well, of course, that would not be a very ideal situation. With that thought, I leave the scene. An hour or so later, on my way back, what do I see? I see a big, deep footprint in that patch where the freshly laid out cement had been installed. Of course, someone has clearly stepped on it, most likely out of carelessness, leaving a lasting impression on the road, and of course, probably destroying their shoes in the process, and not necessarily leaving a positive impression on the road and indeed others who are looking at this situation afterwards. Now, the same thing can happen in communication as well. If we don't pay close attention, we risk leaving a lasting impression on others that might harm our reputation. I recently experienced this when I tuned into a podcast, and the interview was with someone that I was very excited to hear. This was a leader of a prominent tech company driving one of the most important technological trends of our time. And clearly, I had a lot to learn from them, and I was excited to listen to this podcast. But 5 minutes in, I decide to tune out. I can't listen anymore. And the reason is simple. I ask myself, well, why am I not able to listen to the rest of the show an hour or so long? It's because the ums and the ahs and the you knows and the sort of and the kind of, they're putting me off to the point that I feel that the main message of the speaker is drowning out and the filler words and the non words are taking over. It became a painful exercise to extract the message from all that clutter. He clearly had diamonds, but of course, those diamonds were buried so deep that I had to abandon my search. Now, a few days later, I saw the same person, the same leader of this prominent company, appear in a clip in my feed. This person had gone on live TV, and this was a clip of them speaking on live TV. Now, I asked myself, okay, do I want to click on this link as I was making that decision, I was reminded of that podcast interview, and I thought to myself, well, it was a painful exercise last time. Do I want to try again? And somehow I decide against clicking on that link and opening that video. What a tragedy. What a tragedy. I feel a bit embarrassed to not have given this person a second chance. Here's a leader who is changing the course of humanity with cutting edge technology, someone much smarter than me, much more accomplished than I am, with invaluable insights to share. Yet I am put off with the delivery. And that is keeping me from learning all the valuable insights that they have to share. Filler words must be eliminated for that reason. Now, a lot of people think that nervousness is the biggest fundamental cause for filler words, but I believe speaking fast is another factor which is less talked about. Yes, nervousness can contribute to us using things like and ah and sort of and kind of, if we are nervous, maybe those things come out a bit more. But I think speaking faster than how quickly our brain can form thoughts and send them to our mouth to give words to those thoughts, that can be an important factor in us filling the gaps with arms and ahs and sort of and kind of and all of these filler words. So let me give you 3 practical tips for overcoming this problem of littering your speech with these things that we don't necessarily want. First one, slow down. Just give yourself more time to process your thoughts and give yourself more time to have those thoughts go from your brain to your mouth and have the right vocabulary to communicate those thoughts. If we speak too fast and we haven't really thought about what we're going to say, so kind of we don't really know what the next thought is, so sort of kind of we just keep talking and sort of you see, if I'm speaking too fast, faster than the pace that I'm comfortable with. Of course, some people will speak faster than others. Whatever pace we are comfortable with, if we are speaking faster than that pace and we haven't got the vocabulary to match that pace, then inevitably we will fill the gaps with ums and ahs because we feel we need to keep talking. So just slow down a little bit, allow yourself more time to process your thoughts and convey them more effectively. So that's number one. Number two is pause. Now, pausing is one of the most powerful tools any speaker can use. It gives emphasis on an important point that you might have just communicated. It allows the audience time to process what you've just said. And instead of you just keeping if you just keep talking and you don't pause and you just keep delivering one sentence after the other, you don't necessarily give your audience time to process what you've just said. And some sentences, some messages warrant a pause because you want to give your audience a second or two to just process the importance of what you have just communicated. So, pausing is important. Now, there are a couple of reasons why people find it difficult to pause. One, they feel like they have too much to say. If they've got a 10-minute presentation, for example, and they've got 50 messages, then they, of course, have to pack everything in. And if they pause, they waste precious time. So they keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. And they don't have time to pause because, well, if they pause, how will they get through all of the stuff that they've prepared? So, of course, have fewer things to say. Identify your most important messages and bring them to your presentation. Whatever time that you've been given, if it's 10 minutes, identify a suitable number of messages for those 10 minutes. If it's more, again, think about how many messages are most important for your presentation. And of course, fewer things that you have to say, less rushed you will be in your presentation. And if you are less rushed, you can then pause. The second reason why people find it hard to pause is this fear that if you pause, you will lose your audience and someone might interrupt you and uh, you will lose the attention of your audience. Now, that fear, I feel, can be overcome by just trying. When we pause, especially if we have the floor, like if you are delivering the presentation, of course people are listening to you, right? People are listening to you. You've been given 10 minutes or 20 minutes, so there's no risk that people will uh, lose interest in your presentation just because you've paused for 2 seconds. In fact, you will draw them in. If you pause for 2 seconds after delivering a very important punchline, and and you just allow that silence to sink in, people will be drawn in and they will pay more attention. And once you feel that energy in the room, you'll feel that, hey, this wasn't too bad. In fact, I suddenly felt that the audience was paying more attention, and that fear that I might lose the audience was maybe something that was more in my mind and my imagination. Of course, if you are in a conversation, that's where you might think, if I pause, someone else might interrupt me. That's where my tip number 3 comes in. And the tip number 3 is to practice deliberate sentences. What's a deliberate sentence? Now, here's an exercise you can try. Ask ChatGPT to give you a passage. The passage could be an important passage from a movie. It could be a passage from a famous speech, something that carries a bit of weight. And just practice delivering that sentence like an actor. Yeah, it's a script. You are practicing delivering a script. And you will notice when ChatGPT will give you this passage, you will notice that there is different types of punctuation in this passage. There might be a comma, there might be a full stop, there might be a dash, there might be an exclamation mark, a question mark, all of these things. Now, I want you, as you deliver this passage, I want you to think about how you are going to bring that punctuation in your delivery. Of course, when it's a pause, it sounds very different to a full stop. If it's an exclamation mark, it's an exclamation mark. What if it's a question mark? Is the punctuation clearly being communicated in your delivery? Now, once we start seeing the difference in how the different types of punctuation should be delivered, we see that the pauses should be different. Now, of course, the pause associated with a comma feels different to the pause associated with a full stop. Some people call it an active pause because there's something still to be said. If you are pausing, it means you still have something to say, but you are pausing on a comma, and people will realize that. So you once you start articulating your commas in a way that you're not quite finished yet, but you are pausing to make your delivery more effective. That will also give you the comfort that you can pause in different ways and not lose your audience, even if it's a conversation, even if it's a situation where you fear that someone might jump in and you might lose your audience. So try those three things. Slow down, number one, pause, number two, and just practice delivering these passages. And once we just use our muscles slightly differently, we become a bit more comfortable in how our delivery will make it clear to our audience that we still have something to say, and it's important enough for you to pay attention to it. And once we see the feedback from our audience, once we start doing these things, we'll become less fearful of pausing and slowing down and and allowing our point to land and allowing that silence to sink in for a couple of seconds. So, filler words, of course, can hurt our credibility, just as we might question the attentiveness of someone who steps into wet cement. Audiences will question our focus if we litter our speech with unnecessary words. Pay close attention. Ultimately, it all boils down to us having that self awareness, paying attention to what we are saying, being vigilant, and of course, if we are vigilant, we will not leave a lasting footmark of carelessness. We will not step into wet cement. Thank you for tuning into Show Stopping Speakers with me, Mobeen Tahir. Subscribe for more stories and practical tips for becoming a memorable public speaker and share it with someone who might find it useful. And I will see you next time.